So hi, welcome to this Hellblade Q&A with Tamim and myself. We've got your questions from Twitter, Facebook and on hellblade.com, so we'll get started. So the first one is from Alec Chalmers, and it is: have you found the team size for the game comfortable? Have you had to cut much due to team constraints?
Okay, first part of the question, is it comfortable at 15? I'd say it is. It's a good sized team. It's easy to communicate and coordinate what we're doing, and we can easily all jump into a room and talk about stuff if we need to. There's one of everyone that covers every discipline. When we started off, we started off with kind of like, I don't know how many, like 6 or 7 or 8, and started building up. And things were really tight, and there were gaps in development. And I think in 15 it seems to be okay. We have everyone covered. In terms of cutting stuff, you tend to design around what you have in terms of the team and resources and budget. And this is true whether you're working with 15 people or 150 people. So you design to the size of your team. There's never enough people, even on previous projects where we have had 150 people, we still had to cut. So you always try and be a little bit more ambitious than is reasonable, no matter what your team size.
I think it was quite interesting in one of our meetings the other day when you talked about, let's try not to cut stuff but find more innovative ways of doing things. Yeah.
So I mean, that's been the ethos when you're down to a team like 15 people. Like, the ethos has to be to try and do more with the team. So rather than adding new people when you have a problem, you have to think about how you can do it a different way. And I've rarely come across any problem that can't be solved in another way. You just have to make sure that people know that there is no other way. So it gives them the freedom to then think and take some chances.
Okay, so next one is from Pia, who we know.
Yes.
And her question is: considering the concept of independent AAA, did your approach to project management differ from the usual?
Hello, Pia. Yes, it's very different. When you have a large team, you have it's a lot of coordination, a lot of logistics, and you have producers on board. So you might have one producer for every 10 people or so, or 10 or 15 people on the team, and they coordinate a lot of things, including communication, workflows, schedules, everything. With 15 people, you don't really need to do it that way. Well, you don't need to do it that way. Because there's mainly one person in every discipline, whether it's art or audio or character, they manage their own work, and they communicate with the rest of the team by standing up and talking to them or shouting over the desks. There's the project management per se is less about traditional project management in a sense of schedules and big lists. It's more about setting a good direction for the team and making sure that the steps that everyone's taking to get there make sense to their workflow. So yes, it is very different. I wouldn't call it project management in the classical sense, because it's got that connotation of fastidiousness, and in this team we want it to feel like people have freedom over their workflow, the way they do things. They're responsible, everything's time boxed. They have this much time to achieve this, but instead of someone running around with a big stick, it's up to them to make sure that they hit that and achieve it by whatever means is possible.
Okay, next one is from Charlie Zocht. Forgive me if I pronounced that incorrectly. Does Senua develop during the plot of Hellblade? Will she overcome some of her fears?
Yes, Senua has to deal with what she's facing, and otherwise she would be overwhelmed and destroyed. It's like as often the case, you have to face your challenges in order to overcome them. You have to face the insurmountable fears and not knowing whether you're going to survive, to be able to then adapt to a new frame of mind. And what I'm saying here is equally applicable to Senua and to us as a development team, in a sense. You face what your fears are. You don't know how you're going to resolve them, but that fear can turn into an energy that's used positively.
I think that concept of our characters developing throughout the course of a game is something that you find in all of our games, actually, that it still seems to be quite rare in games now, that you see a character actually change throughout the course of a game.
Yeah, I mean, in films and books and things, it's considered a requirement. I don't think it is a requirement, but I think it's when you're telling a story, I think it's not really, for me anyway, it's not about plot. It's not about plot devices. I don't really find that aspect of stories interesting. What I find interesting in a story is the protagonists, the characters, and what happens to them and how they react to things, and that's what's interesting. And when you see someone suffer and change and evolve as a character, it's more interesting than seeing someone that's just the same all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, from Ducky, will the level of success of Hellblade determine if you'll continue to use open development in future projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the reason we're doing open development is to connect to our fans, people like you guys, to get an inside view of what we're doing, the kind of the care and the process. I think for me it's always been the most interesting part of development is actually the process of making a game, and it feels good to share that with everyone. I think there's a lot there for people to get to learn, but also it helps us to connect with our fans in a way that we've never really been able to do in the past, because we've always been behind a wall of publisher PR, and sometimes our message doesn't really get through that. And I think in future I can see open development going further than just us, a one-way thing where we show you what we're doing. But I can see in a few years' time that people get involved in the actual development themselves. And I'm not clear on the path to that, but there are very good examples of that happening right now, like the new Unreal project. I think there's a real opportunity to help people who are interested in the art and craft of making games to learn with developers and then contribute back to the developers. And maybe it's a slightly utopian vision, but I think it's something that is to the benefit of everyone, and I think we should try and find a way for that to happen in future.
Yeah, we see a lot of fan art and mods that people create that are really, really good.
Yeah.
And would actually like to be part of our games. Like with DMC Definitive Edition, we had the chance to look at some community mods that have been created and actually integrate them into that version of the game, which was great. So I think with Hellblade, beyond release, it'd be really interesting to see what people do with the game, and maybe that's the type of thing that we'll be able to integrate into future updates.
Yeah.
So from Andrew Hawkins, were you influenced by any philosophers or analytical psychiatrists in particular?
As you probably know if you've been watching our dev diaries, Paul Fletcher is a psychiatrist and neuroscientist, and he's been enormously influential. He's been very good at introducing us to the science behind behind psychosis and schizophrenia and those kinds of conditions. And and we have regular chats with him in person, but also on email. I chat to him one on one, and sometimes it's not really even about the game. It's just about theories of how the mind work, and then I have a thought or an idea, and I check with him and see whether that makes sense about how our brains work. It's endlessly fascinating, and out of that then comes ideas on how we could actually represent it. So, like, talking to Paul's been amazing. I've been reading a few books. So I've been reading How to Create a Mind by Ray Kurzweil, who's famous for his theory on the singularity, AI singularity. So that takes on a more computational model of the mind and how that works, but also asks some good philosophical questions. So yes, I'm always looking out for kind of interesting perspectives and thoughts, and some of it's nothing to do with necessarily Hellblade. It's just personal interest, you know.
Yeah.
But often that's where ideas come from. They don't come from sitting down and saying, right, I'm going to make a game. They come from general interests and thoughts and ideas that you have outside of games that you bring in.
Okay, so from Hayrul Baron, how can I order merchandise items of Hellblade if I'm in another country? So so we're kind of at the final stages of setting up the Ninja Theory store, and the way that we are offering merchandise to people in different countries is that we're holding stock in different distribution centres. So I know the frustration when there's something that you want to buy, like a t-shirt on a website, and it's on the other side of the world and it's going to cost you a lot of money to get it to your country. And that's why we've got distribution centres in different parts of the world to try and get the stock as close to you as possible, so that when you order, A, it doesn't take a huge amount of time to get to you, and B, it doesn't cost too much as well. So we'll be launching the store very, very soon. We're just making sure that everything is perfect before we go ahead and do that. So number 7 is from Jade Newman, who is a long-time Ninja Theory fan.
Jade?
What made you want to tackle the issue of mental illness in Hellblade?
It's not one. It doesn't come from one place. Like, creativity is a subject I'm interested in. Mental health is a subject I'm interested in, and at some point, a lot of these threads came together, and I guess the aha moment is to think that actually a video game could represent some of the issues in a way that we're not normally exposed to. I thought it was quite. I'll be more specific. Like, okay, so like I was reading about people's experiences on Reddit, and that was one of the most eye-opening threads I've read on the condition. I had no idea of how intense and powerful psychosis could be for people, or schizophrenia could be. How it's just really, I actually got quite frightened. I was in my house on my own and I was reading this stuff, and I started to get a little bit paranoid and frightened, which is, you know, and then you imagine what someone must be going through when they have a voice screaming at them, or there's a demon in their room staring at them, and then these are vivid, real things that happen to them. It's no good saying it's not real to someone that's seeing someone or hearing something, because for them it's absolutely real. It makes no difference whether you say it's not real. So that was one thing, and I started reading about it after that as well. But also, like, I think it's 1 in 10 people will develop schizophrenia. 1 in 100 people, 1% of the population develops psychosis or symptoms of schizophrenia across the world. That's a huge number, and a much larger proportion suffers from serious mental conditions. I think 40% of Americans at some point in their lives. I personally think that it's everyone. Everyone at some point in their life will suffer from a serious or fairly serious mental health condition. They may not recognize it, it might not be understood, but they do. So again, I think it's something that's worth understanding and talking about, and perhaps not hiding away and saying this is a subject that's too sensitive to touch, but if it's affecting us all, either directly or through people we know, then I think it should be something that is out there in the open, and that when you see it acknowledged in a video game or in a movie or in a book, you understand that it's not just you, that it's out there, and that it's not hopeless. Like, it's lots of people recover, lots of people are treated, lots of people learn to live with it, but you're not going to get to that point if you're hiding.
Okay. This is from Leo Franco Suzy. Sir Tam, are you a sir now? Have you been knighted?
I don't think so.
Well, let's say you are. So, Sir Tam, are you also the one who will write and create the script?
Okay. So, story development, I've covered. We covered in our last diary, which gives a good overview of the process we're taking. So, I always think of story development as one with level design. So, when you see our games, you don't get someone that's written the story and then a bunch of designers that have designed the levels, and then they come together at some point and we add the script. It's all part of the same process. So it's a group effort. We get together. I do a lot of planning work, and then we get together as a group and start talking about it and making notes as we're talking. And then I go off and write a rough pass of the script, and then we get back together and we go through it and read through it and talk through things and massage it and stuff. So I'd say I'm leading the effort, but I'm not the solely responsible. In the end, this will be a game that's that'll be a story by Ninja Theory.
I think the story as well is something that is not just told through the dialogue. So the script is one thing, but it's like the entire game is a story experience. So the art tells a story, and the mechanics tell a story. The whole thing is a story. So I think it's everyone needs to be on the same page. And of course, having 15 people, it makes it a smoother process to have a smaller group that everyone's got a very clear understanding of the direction and where we're heading to with it.
Absolutely, it's you tell a story through cameras, lighting, action. In fact, I actually recommend looking at some of the. I think it's worth looking at some of the lessons from people like Alfred Hitchcock and Kurosawa. They're available on YouTube on their methods of cinematic storytelling. It just shows just how much of storytelling is non-verbal.
Okay, so question number 9 from Cameron Craig. How has it been working towards making the game elements less gamey, like optical illusions? What are the challenges that you've faced when trying to integrate these sorts of things and the narrative into gameplay in a less obvious and less traditional way? So I suppose this goes back to the point that we've made early on, is that we're going without a HUD in the game because we want to keep the player in Senua's world and on that journey with her.
Yes, it's a very difficult thing because my experience of testing the game with players in the past, not this game, previous games, is that no matter how much you think you're buttoned up, no matter how much you're showing in terms of on the screen and everything, when you put it in front of someone, they get lost and confused, and usually the solution is to put more stuff up on the HUD. And I think we have to take a leap in the opposite direction for this game to make it feel like you're in the world and it feels real. When we did a vertical slice, people did get lost and confused and things weren't clear. So the challenge is still there, but we have to find other ways. Like, it's almost like putting things on the HUD is too easy. You know, like, how do you do, like, I mean, instead of having a locator bar that tells you where your next objective is, why not have the pad rumble? And if you're pointing in the right direction, it changes its rumble, so you get a feeling for where things are. Or with doing things with sound or visually on the character. Like, I think it's, again, interesting if you if you kind of ban one thing that's common, that everyone uses and knows it works. It forces you to think creatively about how else you can do it, and that in itself is interesting. Like, that's another good, fun, creative challenge to try and work out.
Yeah.
But also, we have to assume that the people who play this game are people who have played games for years. So we have to give, that's what we're targeting our fans, people who have played games. They're familiar with them.
Yeah.
It's not an everyman's game. So I think we also have to know that we have to give the player the benefit of the doubt that they will figure it out and they'll learn it.
Okay, final question for today is from Raphael. As creative minds, what kinds of experiences are you crafting that will get gamers emotionally invested in Hellblade?
Everyone's a creative mind, by the way. We're just allowed to do it for a living. What kind of experiences are crafting that will get you emotionally invested? Okay, so that's a tough question, because how do you make something emotional, right? So you can buy a book called Emotioneering, and it'll give you like several hundred rules on on how you create emotion. There's all kinds of guides on how you create emotions. I don't buy any of it. I think you have to understand who your character is, and you have to tell her story. Like, her story has to be, at its core, emotional for her. And then the skill is in how you portray that. Like, do you do it in dialogue, which is often not the effective way? Or do you do it by, with things like cinematography and camera editing? Yes, you can do it that way. But ultimately, you have to believe that she is real and the world is real, and that the challenges she faces are plausible and real. And then you have to connect with her. Like, if you can make her feel real and the world feel real, you don't even have to make a character particularly likable. You just have to make that person feel real in a real world with real challenges. And once you're invested in that, you start to feel like, you start to bond. Like, in the same way that when you know someone very well, a friend, you bond with them, and if you see them going through trouble, you feel distressed, or you get a connection. That's what you have to do. You have to create a connection.
And so that is really why we use things like performance capture to shoot our cinematics, because it makes that character believable down to the nuance of their facial movement, or the way that they move their body while they're talking, which is why we capture face, body and voice all at the same time, is because it makes it believable, so that as a player, you are with that character, you're in that world, you're believing it, and that does in itself evoke emotion.
Yes, we're not doing it to show off.
Yes.
It's not about, look, we can capture face, body, voice, cameras. All I know is that when you're filming someone on set with a camera, and you've asked them to put everything into their performance, and everything's working together, like, into a scene, on set, people watching that scene start to feel something, like it's palpable. And that's what you want to capture. And you can't, in my opinion, capture that if you have someone doing the body mocap, and then another person doing facial expressions, and then another person doing voiceover. Like, where does that honesty come from when you're doing things that way? It's not the same. Apart from it taking a lot longer to actually all put together. You're trying to capture something that's real, fundamentally.
You can miss the nuance. You miss the things that you don't necessarily notice, but that make it special.
Yes, and I think And I think that's true not just of acting, but like that's true of the world you create. The world has to feel like it's believable, that it's not overly inconsistent, that it doesn't go rip you out because you go, oh, it's just a video game.
Yeah.
You know, once you've ripped someone out of a world, you've lost them, and you're probably not going to get them back. You really have to try. It's very delicate. You have to do everything possible to make someone believe in that world. And even a game like Tetris, like it's consistent, it's simple, the world is very simply defined, and you're in it. Like it's fine. Even something as simple as that can be believable. But when you're creating human journeys, it's much harder, and you have to be very careful.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot. So thanks a lot for all of your questions, and for all of your support. It means so much to us and the team working on Hellblade. So until next time, thank you.
Thank you.